Good morning, everyone. It's Graham Coath with another My Music, sponsored by Nextstand. In a minute, I'm going to be speaking to Tim from Tiny Fighter, and I've got a question for you all to ponder. One person in this band is a doctor. The other is a bin man. Who is it? We'll find out after this.
I need to get going, mate. I'll see you later.
Tim, thanks for joining me. All the way from where are you coming from, sir?
Well, today I'm coming to you from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
Lovely, lovely. I'm coming to you from the unsunshine, not coast of Somerset. Not far from the coast, but definitely grey and dreary and a little bit wet here today. And is it living up to its? Well, I don't know. It's dark there still at the moment, is it? Or
yeah, it's about 7:30 at night, but midsummer, we're having cracking days, Graham.
Oh, just make us all jealous. Make us all jealous. So Tim, tell us who's the doctor in the band?
All right, so that was a good question, Graham. But I'm the doctor, so my background is as a GP, and Therese, who's the singer, is for many years now a truck driver. So
a truck driver. That's right. Yeah. And how did you come to meet?
Yeah, well, look, back in 2016, I think it was, I made the move from Melbourne, where I was originally from, and all the way over to Stockholm. And it wasn't much science to this. It was really get the map out, find one of the places the furthest away on the map and just go. But fortunately, Sweden's one of those musically pretty strong countries. And so it didn't actually take too long to find Therese. It was random ad put, in a Swedish online band finder. Me not knowing any Swedish at the time, I probably sounded like a crazy man. But Therese was, with vocalists, straight away. And I think when she sent some demos across, I just knew instantly it was going to work.
Yeah, brilliant. So how come you were in that part of the world, given that you're now in Australia? So
yeah, well, look, I split my time between Sweden and Australia, and that was something that was partially forced with COVID. It was just, as you may be aware, it's and as Novak Djokovic has just discovered, it's a little tricky getting into Australia right now. And
really?
The same applies in reverse. It's a little tricky getting out, and so we originally came back for a visit about 6 months ago, and we're still here. So the idea would be, we have a base back in Sweden as well. So we'll hopefully, when things settle down, we'll be back to get back onto the live circuit and tour again.
Yeah. Now, we don't get too many. What kind of doctor are you, by the way? I mean, there's lots of different types of doctors.
Look, mainly a GP.
GP, okay.
Yeah, but I've got a specialty in neurology and infectious diseases.
Right. Well, okay. That's quite a topic to have as a speciality in the middle of a pandemic, isn't it?
Well, you're employable, Graham. You're employable.
Yeah, definitely at the moment. So tell me, you don't have too many doctors come through the show who are also musicians. Growing up, was that ever at odds with you? I mean, the kind of more science-based approach to life and logic, etc., and also then the music being a more creative force.
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and I think you'd be surprised just how many medicos or scientists actually do play an instrument or perform, and I think in some respects it's therapy, to be honest. I mean, to use that sort of other part of your head is a real. I mean, I think it begins for most of us as just something to relax with, and there's not a world of difference in some respects between, say, science or mathematics and musical composition, and so they're not completely at odds with one another. But I think in the real world, it really is therapeutic. to be able to, if you had your brain in the medical or the scientific sphere all day, I think you'd be a screaming mess by the end of it. So it truly is, I guess, escapism.
Yeah.
And there is that, as I mentioned, there is that sort of mathematical, scientific overlap as well, particularly in electronic music or classical or whatever the case may be. But they do complement each other, I think.
And has that been useful as well when you've been talking to patients? Obviously, you can't talk about specific patients, but has, the fact that you have the music there, has that been a useful sort of conversation starter at all, ever?
Yeah, look, it does, and I think you'd be surprised. I mean, there is a sort of growing field of music therapy, and particularly in, say, neurology, or people with sort of acquired brain injuries and the like. I think music sort of taps into a different part of your movement and your thinking, and we've certainly found that musical therapy has a place in, again, also like psychiatry of post-traumatic stress. And so, it depends on the type of patient, but for those perhaps who themselves come from a musical background, it is particularly helpful and naturally can be part of a treatment as well. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of interviews, by the way? I mean, given your subject matter, are you regularly called upon to give interviews on neurology at the moment, or?
Yeah, look, it's sort of dropped off a little bit. I think like live music, for example, sort of COVID killed the conference, the conference trail. So I mean that's coming back, but I think people tend to ask me more about neurology than they do music, Graham. I think I'd rather the other way around, to be honest. But that's part of the communication side. I mean, one of the things I like about practical medicine compared to, say, being in the lab or in front of a computer is, you need to do the people thing, and that's very true of live performance as well, I reckon. I mean, you got to play to your audience, whether it be a scared kid who's just about to be operated on, or some guy sitting at the back of a pub crossing his arms looking menacingly at you. It's a similar kind of thing.
Well, let's make this a great music interview for you. Well, you must have watched music interviews in the past with heroes of yours, etc. So, what's your favourite kind of music interview? What makes a great music interview for you?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, and I think it's those interviews which give you. For me, it's not necessarily insight into the people; it's more an insight into, and maybe this is the musician thing, but the songwriting process, how they construct, and I think often you need an interviewer who themselves is perhaps not necessarily a fan, but is a general music fan. So I think I often say it's try to avoid meeting your idols, because if you learn about what some of your heroes may actually really think, you may be disappointed. But I'm interested in the process, I guess. So perhaps the more technical interviews, although I'm mindful that's probably dead boring for everybody else.
Right. I'm completely the opposite. You see, I like to meet my heroes. I think that's great. I'm open to being. I don't think I'd ever be disappointed. In a way, I don't think I'd ever be disappointed by that, because, in a way, I know I kind of expect the answer that I'm going to get. I'm pretty realistic about it. And that's one of the reasons I started doing these in the first place, was because I went through the process of being in bands from the age of 14. I was a musician. I had a record contract, etc. So I know about some of the real aspects of it, and I know what it's, that there isn't any magic necessarily. There is just a lot of hard work in there to be a musician, but also a lot of fun. And I think actually nobody's really ever disappointed me on that. I think that's true, Graham. But I think in terms of insight, I find it more interesting to listen to like writers or radio folk like yourself. I think sometimes musicians are a little bit too enmeshed in the process to be objective, and I think
music critique itself. I mean, it's a real art form. I remember like growing up reading Melody Maker or NME. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but I mean, the economy of the writing.
Well, Melody Maker's gone. Enemy is a pamphlet now.
Is that pamphlet? Oh, that's disappointing. They were fantastic mag for a while there.
Yeah.
But I think, the ability to say so much in one paragraph, I think, that was, I guess, sort of a real highlight to give you insight into an album that you love to listen to that a million times over that you never, I guess, cottoned onto. So to be honest, I'd probably rather listen to you, Graham, than another muso.
Well, that's where I was going to take you next. Albums that you really love to listen to. Growing up, which were the albums that really sparked it off for you?
Oh, look, I mean, in terms of like cumulative influence, I think the real watershed for me was probably Pixies. So, like Doolittle and Surfer Rosa, I think, I grew up in a pretty non-musical, family and, a bit of an aberration, I guess. And so it wasn't like music was, played around the house or you're exposed to it all the time. And to be honest, Graham, like my main sort of pathway into it was film soundtracks. So you go watch a film and then you can pair the visual with the sound. So I guess besides the Pixies, I think some of my more formative records are probably soundtracks, to be honest.
Really? Anyone in particular on the soundtrack side of things?
Oh, look.
What films?
Oh, look, growing up, I just love the Bond soundtracks, like Dave Arnold, all those guys. And yes, it was a little bit hammed up in places, but it really told a story. It didn't actually need any lyrics. But look, it's pretty diverse. Things from Bond or Hans Zimmer, all the way through to what I think is probably the most interesting music coming out these days are video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
And I think because it's by definition longer form. These games, your role playing games or whatever, go for days, if not hours, and you need a soundtrack that goes with that. So I've really, I think more recently discovered a lot of game score composers. So a bit of soundtrack, but then all the obvious stuff. So Pixies was the watershed. It really gave me an idea that with music you could be playful, I guess. You can be scary and silly and happy and miserable pretty much within the same song. And I think it really opened the gates as to what is possible with a song.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just loved what Black Francis used to do with his voice as well, or still does, but some of the
scream, yeah.
Well, yeah, things like "Got the book on face." I just the way that he does it, and it's almost staccato in the rhythm of that, and then the guitar comes in after. It's just brilliant.
It's so it could be so percussive and manic, but it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Just absolutely fits. I get the whole film thing. I get the whole, and film and TV as well, I guess. I can remember there was a period at school where everybody was going around trying to play Axel F. Remember that?
It's a cracker.
It's just like everybody was getting a keyboard for the first time, and it's like, can you play Axel F on the keyboard? Harold Faltermeyer.
I think every generation has an Axel F. I'm not too sure what it is now, but it's one that is singularly responsible for inflating the sales of synthesizers.
Yeah, well, I think we were all amazed. I grew up in the generation where we were all absolutely amazed by the fact that you could actually buy a keyboard and there was a button on it where you pressed it and then it played a whole tune.
Yeah.
And then it was, the demo button. That
demo
was
button rocks. Yeah.
That was a new thing that kind of came out in the 80s. Before that, if you had an old synthesizer or whatever, you had to be able to play something on it. Then suddenly someone had a great idea. Why not really get people into this by putting a demo in there? Then at least you could feel like you were getting started. and try and play along.
I think the demos are still there. I mean, I bought a chord keyboard the other day, and it still has a demo on it. It's very tempting just to press it and sit back and enjoy the magic.
I think, well, it made it much easier for people in shops to sell these things as well. Let's not forget that. If you didn't play, I think that's part of it as well. Where musical instruments ended up widened, didn't it? So at one point, music instruments, you could only buy them from music shops or musical instrument shops. And then suddenly musical instruments were being sold in toy stores, in general stores, or, Dixon's, Curry's, places like that. So therefore, there weren't necessarily musicians to play them. You had to put a demo in there because otherwise no one would know what it sounded like. You could just go,
exactly.
Doo, doo. Oh, no, that's brilliant. So what led you on your path to the kind of music that you're making now?
Oh, look, that's a really good question. And, even back before relocating to Sweden, I played in a fairly diverse range of bands in locally, from anything from indie pop and rock to folk and country. And I think being a bit of a latecomer and not really having any family influences, I was kind of given free rein to discover it for myself. So I was kind of a smorgasbord, to use a famous Swedish word. Never really pegged against one genre, whether that be sort of hip hop or rock. And there's bits of this you like and bits of that you like. And I think I spent a good time trying to mash it all up with varying degrees of success. But I think the more you do this, the more you appreciate the songcraft, I guess. I mean, and just how difficult it is, and how you can't force this. And I think that pursuit for economy in songwriting kind of led me full circle back to where I started, which was, I guess, sort of indie pop and guitar-driven type of bands like the Pixies, for example. And it seems like a long loop to get back from where you started, but I think I enjoyed that process of simplifying things, whereas back in the past you may have played 5 notes where two would do. And I remember a great interview with Robert Smith from The Cure, and they were asking him something similar about how he wrote songs, and it was all about economy. He goes, why play 10 notes when one will give you more of the effect? It's more important to infer the next note or suggest the next note rather than make it obvious and play it, even though that's where your brain's going. And so, that's a lot of neurological stuff going on there as well. So, so it's been a bit of a circular journey, but back with
that's interesting to get it from the neurological point of view, because it's a topic that comes up a lot on this show, which is that it's just as important to create the space in a song as it is to fill that space. In fact, actually, it's one of the things that a lot of young musicians do wrong a lot of the time, is that they just try and fill
hard and fast.
Hard, fast, loud. And there's nothing wrong with that, but actually learning to appreciate space and actually leaving room in a song quite often comes with time. Although there's some young musicians seem to pick it up really quickly these days compared with how we used to pick it up. I think I was in bands for ages where we were like, everybody turn everything up, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, let's be clever.
Look, it's very true, and I think they're the real talents of the I guess out of nowhere young folk, which just have that knack for the balance of a song. And it's like writing or any other art form. I mean, this is something you do hopefully your entire life, and arguably you get better and better, but there are just those rare gems who can just nail it when they're 18, 19, and my hat's off to them. So.
Yeah. And you said when you found your singer, you just kind of knew. And so how much of your writing is reflected around that singing voice, because it is a great voice.
Yeah, look, it's really good, and she's had no training. She's barely been in any bands before, and I was actually quite surprised she was available when I was looking for singers. But look, the songwriting process is fairly separate. So how it typically works is that I'll put most of the instruments together, sort of record most of it at home, and almost effectively hand over a complete or near complete instrumental track to Therese. And my approach with her and with most singers really is to give almost zero guidance.
Right.
And it might occasionally, when you're in the studio, particularly when it comes to harmonies and the more sort of subtle production methods, it would be a bit more back and forth. But what you hear on the record is effectively me doing my bit, hand it over to Therese. She'll almost knock it out on a first take or a second take. So I've learned just to hand it over and stand back.
So that's really interesting. So your method of writing, in a way, is quite movie soundtrack.
Yeah, no, that's really perceptive. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's because I guess I don't.
You're not sitting there going with even with something going along in your head, like word wise or whatever. Going.
Well, no, not at all. And that's our usual. If we have a flashpoint, Graham, this is it. So usually what happens is I'll hand a song over, and Therese, being obviously lyrical or lyrically minded, will ask me what's it about, and I'll be going, I don't know. I don't. I guess it's the vibe. I don't write about anything explicit or specific or a particular moment. It's just that that note goes well with that, and it gives me I guess like a soundtrack. It gives me a feeling which is not sharp or crystal clear, but it's a sense or a vibe. And
so there's a sort of structural element to it, which is kind of like the Doctor bit. But is there an emotive element to it? So when you're creating that song, etc., I mean, is there an overriding sort of emotion that you experience to that, or actually do you just leave that as well? Because as soon as you put lyrics to something, that can completely turn the emotive part of the song.
Yeah, of course, that's always a danger, because the songs are your babies. But I mean, this is why I think it's worked with Tiny Fighter, is that it's absolutely true. There's no, when during composition, there's no specific emotion or feeling. There's a broad vibe, I think, but with very few exceptions, when the songs are handed over for the lyrical development, almost as a rule, it makes it better. It kind of captures what I was trying to say, and I can never actually put it into words myself, but I don't have to, because it's I think Therese has got a very good knack of being able to tap into that emotion without ever making it a caricature or overwhelmed, which is actually quite impressive when you think that English is not her first language.
Absolutely.
So it works.
No, absolutely. So what's left for you on the ambition list in terms of music?
Oh, look, I just want to get back playing live. It's been such a long time, Graham. It's, COVID just killed it. And that's true in Sweden and England and Australia.
Everywhere.
It was the first thing to go, and unfortunately it'll be the last thing to come back. And now that we're in that sort of second album part of the cycle, and we do have a lot of songs partially written, but they need that live, I guess, input, that sort of, where you can gauge how are people responding to it. So really we have the second album sitting there, which is pretty much going to remain unfinished until we can get back in front of people. So the ambition is to actually go and play together again. I mean, I think everyone's sick of live streams and acoustic. We just want to play as a full band again. That's the ambition.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter where that is. It's just as long as it's in front of real people somewhere.
Yeah, in front of real people who are not already in the band. So yeah, that'd be great.
No, that's brilliant. What about if you could ever work with somebody, for example, musically, is there anybody that you've ever aspired to work with?
Again, the soundtrack composers. I think I have dabbled a little bit in soundtrack composition, but it really, it's borderline orchestral, this stuff. It's that pivot between, or that balance, I should say, between pop and orchestra. So I guess people like Henry Jackman, who does a lot of game scores, Nathan Malaché, it's like a French composer who's done a lot of European, like Midnight Sun, for example. Composers like that. It's something that I like to get good at, and the only way you get good is by being around these people.
So part of the ambition may be to do a song with an orchestra. Yeah,
I love that stuff. Yeah, I've always been a sucker for strings and brass and piano. Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, we've seen many pop bands do it, and some of the results are fantastic.
Absolutely, Tim. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Just so people know, what music of yours can people get as of today?
So, look, as of today, we have an album that we released in December called Rewind, which is up on our Bandcamp, so the Tiny Fighters Bandcamp. But it's all up on Spotify. So we have a bunch of singles, a few EPs. Our debut album, Going Home from, 2020 now. And as I mentioned, the latest album, which came out in December. So that's all up on Bandcamp, Spotify.
It's a beautiful, beautiful album. I played it to my colleague at work, and she was like, "That's amazing."
Oh, thanks, man.
Absolutely amazing. So yeah, it was getting a lot of love in the office, the virtual office, as it were. But there we go. Thanks again for talking to me. I wish you well in this year. I hope your ambition comes true sometime in 2022, that you get to play live. Let's really hope that happens. And if I ever, start getting a headache, I know who to come to now.
That's right. Like I can service all your musical and neurological needs, Graham.
All in one go. Yours is the perfect surgery. That's all I can say, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me today on My Music, and I look forward to seeing a bit more from Tiny Fighter in 2022. Bye.
Thank you, Graham. Bye.